good afternoon. Been up with the kids all morning, but finally got a chance to sit down and to study, a little bit of quiet, and to think of a Torah thought. So today we start a new book, the book of Vayikra. Yesterday we finished the book of Exodus. Hopefully we finished any challenges that we had, and we're coming on to new blessings. A thought of the week. The first words of the book of Vayikra, the whole book is called Vayikra, and the first portion is called Vayikra. The first three words are Vayikra el Moshe. God called to Moses. Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. God called to Moses. We find something very interesting in the Torah, that the word Vayikra has a very small aleph, a miniature aleph. In fact, when we wrote our last Torah, our communal Torah, and we had a big celebration for it, when I came to read it the first time, I realized that Vayikra was a regular aleph. And I called an expert rabbi who deals with this, and he says you have to fix it. Because tradition has that all the way back to Moses' first Torah that he wrote, the aleph was small. There's one other time that the aleph is written not in the regular, but not small, only big. When is that? In Divrei Hayamim, in Tanakh, in the scriptures, where we read the chronicle of human life, and it starts off Adam, Sheis, Enosh, which speaks about Adam, Sheis, and Enosh. The word Adam is in a big aleph, the letter aleph. So we have two contrasts here. From one side, we have a big aleph, and from the other side, we have a small aleph. Why is there a small aleph at the beginning of Vayikra? So I want to take you to a talk that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in 1981. You know, tomorrow, when I'll speak about this a little more, tomorrow is going to be 28 years since my dear Rebbe had a stroke and never spoke to us physically again to this very day. The last talk we heard from the Rebbe was on Shabbos Parshas Vayakhel, which I spoke about on Friday. The Rebbe was our light. The Rebbe guided us spiritually and still does, and his words of wisdom continue to be the reason in our spirituality and the guidance for what we do. And the Rebbe says something like this. The Rebbe says, in order to understand why the small aleph is in Vayikra and the big aleph is in Divrei Hayamim by Adam, is to understand the context of why it's there. In Vayikra, God is calling to Moses. In Divrei Hayamim, it's giving us the chronicle, the history, the story of mankind for the past 3,400 years. And the Rebbe says when you understand that context, you can understand why one is small and why one is big. The question is, in Judaism, are we supposed to be humble, or are we supposed to be self-confident and proud of ourselves? I am important, who am I? Or are we humble people? And the Rebbe says that's a paradox that we find different answers to in Judaism. And the same thing is with Passover. Think about the Passover Seder. And I know we'll get enough time to speak about it, but think about the Passover Seder. From one side, we're told that we can't have any leavened bread, anything that even rose. We need flat matzah, which symbolizes humility. On the second side, we're told to act like kings and queens. We drink 4 glasses of wine. We bring out our gold and our silver, and we lean back and recline as we celebrate. Make up your mind. Kings don't have humility. Slaves do. So are we supposed to be humble? Or are we supposed to be confident and like kings? And the Rebbe says that there's 2 ways a person could be humble and 2 ways a person could be proud of themselves. And they are not mutually exclusive. On the contrary, one lends to another. One way a person could be humble is he feels he's worthless. She feels, who am I? What significance is there to my life? Heaven forbid. What could I accomplish? Another way a person could be humble is thinking and realizing that they are in the presence of God, in the presence of the Almighty. And in the presence of the Almighty, they become humble because of the greatness and the grandeur of the Almighty. Are you a speck of dust or nothing? Or are you someone who is very proud and pompous? Or maybe not pompous, but self-confident. So those are the 2 ways of humility. But there's also 2 ways in how we could think of ourselves in a positive way. One is, I'm the greatest, I am everything, whoever thinks there's anyone else that's significant than me, I am so smart and so important and so intelligent. I think it was 1981, there was a terrible accident in the Black Sea of Russia where two ships collided and it was terrible. Hundreds of people were thrown to their death. And to make things worse, I think a few weeks later, when the facts came out, it was even more terrible. They realized that it wasn't a technological malfunction where one boat didn't see the other or went the wrong way. It was two arrogant captains who each one wanted the other one to move out of their way and didn't want to be the first one to move till it was too late. That's one way. It's all about me. But then there's another way. When we are in God's presence, we're confident with the strength that God gave us. We realize that we're here to serve Hashem. We realize that every strength and everything we have is there to help us serve God. So our self-confidence comes from recognizing the mission that God gave us and from recognizing what we can accomplish. Think about it. Abraham tells God, I am but dust and ashes, right? And earth. What does Moses ask God? Mi anaychi, who am I? And don't we say every day in our service, nafshi ka'afar lakol tiyeh, my soul should be like dust in front of everyone. Yet at the same time, at the moment when Abraham tells God that he is just dust, he's fighting for the people in Sodom and Gomorrah. Moses, the man who says, who am I, is the one who told God, if you don't forgive the Jews, then erase me, blot me out of your Torah. What's this contrast? You know the famous Hasidic master of Simcha Bunim Beshichsta, one of the greatest masters of Hasidism, said that he always has two notes in his pocket. In one pocket he has a note that says, I am but dust and earth. And in the other one, he has what the Mishnah tells us, that every Jew has to believe and every person has to feel like the world was created just for him. How could that be? Says that ever one lends to another. When a person's humility comes from the fact that he's in God's presence and he realizes the God-given talents that Hashem has given him, he understands that at every moment he is a messenger of God. He has a responsibility to perfect and to make this world a better place. So his humility is not a contradiction to his confidence. His confidence comes from his humility, from understanding that God made him and put him on this world to make a difference, to change the world. He is but a messenger of the Almighty. Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, says that one of the greatest people, humble people he met like this was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says the Lubavitcher Rebbe carried himself in a way of regal and was so elegant and so powerful. Yet when you came into the Rebbe's presence and you sat with the Rebbe in a one-on-one audience, he looked at you and made you feel like you were the greatest and most important thing in the world. And he says that's when he realized at that moment that being humble is not forgetting your talents or not realizing what you could accomplish, but it's recognizing that someone else has great talent and someone else is great too. And the Rebbe says that's why in Vayikra, which we read, the first calling, God's calling to Moses, when you're in God's presence, when God's calling you, you're humble. Who are you? You're in the presence of God. There's a small aleph. You always have to remember that you're in the presence of God and that we're only an extension of God. But in Divrei Hayamim, when he's chronicling the history, the story of humanity, that's when we have to step up and be a big aleph. We have to be counted because we realize that we're in the presence of the Almighty, and in the presence of the Almighty, we are significant. We are important. We have a mission. We have something to accomplish to make a difference for someone else. Someone once said that Margaret Thatcher, one of the greatest leaders of Great Britain, he once asked her what was her funniest story she ever had. And she said that one time she went to meet the Queen. And when she went to meet the Queen, she realized as she was ushered in that one time as the Prime Minister to meet with the Queen, she looked and she realized she was wearing the same thing that the Queen was wearing. And she felt devastated. And she went back to her office and she wrote a whole apology note to the Queen. And she promised that from then on, the person, her secretary, will always call the queen's office to make sure what she's wearing, that she shouldn't be wearing the same thing as the queen. And a little bit later, she got a note back from the queen, which said, don't worry at all. The queen didn't notice. She never notices what commoners wear. I don't know about the queen. I don't know what it says about the royal family. I know what it says about each and one of us. We are not commoners. We're the royal people that Hashem has chosen to be a light upon the nations. And yes, when Hashem calls a Moshe Vayikra in the presence of God, we have a small aleph. But at the same point, when we speak about our history, how we're counted, how we're recounted, what we accomplished, when we go out to the world, we need a big aleph, we need pride, we need confidence, we need strength. We need to be able to say, I am here to make a difference in the world of Hashem. Like Simcha Bonav of Peshichta, we need to have two notes. In the right hand, we need a note that I am but dust and earth. And in the other hand, in the other pocket, we need a note that says the world was created for me to make a difference. How are you as a husband or as a wife? Are you ready to take criticism? Do you listen? Or is it all about yourself? You know, in 2014, Harvard Business Journal, I think it was, came out with a study that they did that said that the most successful leaders are humble leaders. You know why? Because they're ready to take criticism and listen to others. Because they're ready to empower others and realize their great talents and strengths. And because they're ready to make changes and constantly be learning from others. Do we have that balance? We need a small aleph and we need the big aleph. That's the power, the message of the Rebbe taught us. I grew up at the Rebbe's feet. And from one side, you saw the Rebbe walk in, you saw royalty, you saw the grandeur, the majesty, the spirituality, the holiness. Yet at the same point, the Rebbe was such a humble person. The Rebbe was ready to talk and spend his time with anyone. Not like some leaders who only want to be with the powerful. The Rebbe spoke to the simple, the pauper, the beggar. In fact, the Rebbe gave love and showed attention to those that were most vulnerable and most left out of society. When I say this today, we're in challenging times. We're all looking at the silver lining. But even when we look at the silver lining, we can't forget how devastating this is on society. How many people are hurting economically. How many people are hurting physically. How many people passed on. How many people are in dire health. How many people are terrified at home. But this is a time when I think about the doctors and the nurses and those in emergency places who are stepping up to the plate. They're recognizing the big aleph, the calling from God to get out there, and while we're staying home and confined to our homes and to our families, they're out there risking their life every single day to make a difference for those that are most vulnerable or are in a dangerous spot. And we have to pray for them and pray that we all recognize that aleph within us. And Hashem should give us that we should have the strength to be able to have the balance between the small aleph and the big aleph. Between Moses' aleph when God calls us, and then the big aleph when we go out to change the world. Have a great day. See you again tomorrow. May it be a blessed day, a day of healing, and a day of love.